Now, this coming Thursday in the new issue of Empire magazine, there will be an interview with Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy, where she discusses many things, including the upcoming Book of Boba Fett series on Disney+. And that will, I'd have to imagine, all but if not outright confirm that the recent reports of her contract renewal are true, and that she'll be with the company another 3 years at least. And from this upcoming interview or magazine, a few excerpts were released today, including some where she talks about the emotional reunion between Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen on the set of Kenobi. Apparently it's been some time since these two have seen each other, and she further comments about how much the roles mean to these two guys. Which, though maybe no surprise to learn, is still awesome to hear nonetheless, and I have, as you may know from other videos of mine, just a little bit of apprehension about how these two characters will interact on screen. What Kennedy meant when she said a while back that we'd see the rematch of the century between them. But all around, I still have high hopes for this upcoming series, and I cannot wait to see these two actors not only playing the characters again, but to see them together on screen. However, there was also another excerpt from this interview that might have some people very excited, and some people less than excited, if not downright unhappy, to put it mildly. Because apparently when asked about the sequel trilogy or its characters, Kennedy is quoted as saying, "Certainly those are not characters we're going to forget. They will live on, and those are conversations that are going on with the creative team as well." Okay, so obviously I don't need to get into it again about how divisive the sequels were, how some people really enjoyed them and some certainly didn't. Either way, this is an interesting piece of information considering the sequels have kind of been in flux, you could say, for the past 2 years since the release of The Rise of Skywalker. There really hasn't been much of anything released in regards to or in relation to them, be that either new content or merchandise. At least not when you consider that you'd think Lucasfilm would want to capitalize on the conclusion of a trilogy as much as they possibly can. You would think they would have been flooding us with new books, comics, and maybe even a new series or show that would expand on this time period and keep the excitement for it going. But again, there really hasn't been much new content at all, as there hasn't been a ton of merchandise either. For example, Hasbro didn't release any subsequent waves of sequel trilogy or The Rise of Skywalker figures after the few initial ones that came out right before or around the release of the film, nor of the numerous announced figures in the works have any related back to the sequel trilogy either. There also hasn't been much of anything from other major toy companies who have the Star Wars license as well. In other words here, it doesn't seem like the sequels were exactly a huge hit with all of, or even a good portion of, the collector base. Which means future projects around those films could also face difficulty when it comes to merchandise aimed at collectors. And as I've talked about before, and as should be pretty obvious I think, a lot of the money Star Wars makes is off of merchandising. This, then along with a steady performance decline at the box office for Star Wars films, not to mention plenty of issues behind the scenes with those films, including the recently learned problems with the intended next Star Wars film Rogue Squadron, where it has since been indefinitely delayed due to problems with Patty Jenkins of some kind, it's led me to assume that Kennedy's time with the company could and maybe should be ending with the expiration of her most recent contract, which was probably up in October. We are not 100% sure exactly what the details were. But even just the way she's talking in this excerpt from the interview, where she says that we're not going to forget, heavily implies, I think, she's not going anywhere anytime soon. It also means assuming she's not just saying that about the sequel characters, because if asked, of course, she's not going to throw the sequels and its fans under the bus and say they're never going to do anything with it ever again. Anyway, if not just saying that, and I'm not implying I think she did, I'm just saying it's not impossible, it means the sequels are obviously very much going to stay a part of the canon, despite all the rumors that said Kennedy and her films and everything she was doing or going to do would be brushed away and eliminated or something. Which again is why I'm trying to talk less and less about all the rumors that are always circulating, because they always have this very strange way of fitting the narratives of the ones reporting on them and the desires of the audience who consumes the content of the one reporting them, almost as if it's all just BS to capitalize and profit off of people's anger, not that anyone in this world would ever do something like that. And look, I'm not saying I've never profited off of people's anger towards Kennedy or Star Wars, but I've always tried to be as fair and as honest as I personally can as a human being who has feelings, emotions, and so on. Not saying I've always succeeded, but I'm going to double my efforts to do that going forward. As I always say, don't listen to me. I'm just some guy who loves Star Wars and loves to talk about it and tries to use reason and logic as much as he can when discussing it. And that you should always think for yourself and come to your own conclusions, and by all means, share those conclusions in the comments below, and let's discuss, let's talk some Star Wars, as I always say. And no, that doesn't mean I'm never going to give my thoughts or opinions or to speculate on what is or what might be happening. I'll certainly continue to give my take on things. I just like to reiterate from time to time that I'm no more or less a Star Wars fan than everyone and anyone else out there. I'm just fortunate and thankful that people seem to enjoy what I do here. And like I said a few videos back, I do want to focus a bit more on creating things instead of just reporting on things going forward. But anyway, I certainly think this news will again have some fans very excited. Those who enjoyed the sequels and have probably noticed the lack in sequel-related content from Lucasfilm will rejoice, while those who were hoping the sequels might continue to sort of be ignored, or that maybe the Mando or Filoniverse, as I sometimes call it, was leading to an alternate future that wasn't the sequel trilogy, maybe they're going to be less happy here, or we may see more of them say, screw it, they're done with Star Wars altogether. And I think that'll especially be the case if the Mandoverse does begin to link up with or flesh out the sequel trilogy, which I don't think it has to do one way or the other. In fact, I think there's a good chance that it will stay pretty much neutral in regards to all this, if you will. That it will continue to see things that could, in theory, connect to the sequels, like how we saw what might be Snoke or some versions of Snoke in vats in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. But there could also be something else entirely for all we know. It could be a different experiment that has nothing to do with Snoke or the sequels. And considering the Mandoverse or Filoniverse is set 25 years before the sequel trilogy, there technically isn't a reason or need to connect everything, and there's every chance that everything going on in The Mandalorian and soon enough with the Book of Boba Fett and the Ahsoka series will be more or less a standalone story that likely involves Thrawn and dealing with the remnants of the Empire before they go off and become the First Order. Or perhaps Star Wars, for better or worse, love or hate the idea, could branch into multiple realities or multiple universes, and I don't say that just because I'm not the biggest fan of the sequels. I say that because it's all about the money. Disney and Lucasfilm, whether they admit it or acknowledge it or not, they know there is a split in the fan base over the sequels. They know they have a bit of a dilemma on their hands that embracing the sequels angers one set of fans, while ignoring or possibly retconning them would of course anger another set. So in their eyes then, what could be the best case scenario? What could make them the most money? Well, embracing both sides, using something like the World Between Worlds somehow to imply there was a split in the timeline, and maybe with what happened to Ahsoka and Rebels, how she was pulled out of that moment she would have died in, that could be where the split happens. Maybe they use something like that and then they hope beyond hope that they don't somehow anger both sides of the fan base. Or that fans just won't like the idea of multiple realities in Star Wars, because honestly I'm not a huge fan of that idea myself. I like one simple, linear, straightforward timeline. But when you consider how Marvel is full on embracing it, embracing the multiverse, and that the next Spider-Man film, No Way Home, is about to embrace it in a really, really big way, and will almost without doubt be the most profitable Marvel film since, well, everything went down, well, I could see Disney being open to doing something like that with Star Wars. But again, these are just my thoughts and speculation. That is all rooted in the knowledge that Disney loves money, not any sort of insider sources I have or anything like that. But honestly, I don't think the general audience would care too much if Star Wars had a sort of multiverse or a split in the timeline somehow, or maybe split it into 3 to bring back the expanded universe as well. I know fans might feel very differently. But as talked about in a video the other day, I don't think it's impossible that the Ahsoka series, in order to bring Anakin into the mix, could be doing something rather interesting with Star Wars already. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Does it sound like Kennedy is staying, and how do you feel about that? And how do you feel about the sequels or its characters being embraced and getting more from them in the near future? Whatever you think, leave a comment below. and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.